Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Beyond the Gatekeepers. I am Bishop-elect Vanessa M. Brown. I'm the moderator for the evening. I'm so glad to have you here tonight. And so you know how I like to do it. I want you all to shout out your city and state. Let us know where you are hailing from so that we can shout it out. We are so glad that you are here with us tonight. And tonight, this is part 2. Go and grab somebody, let them know, text them, inbox them, email them, let them know that part 2 is on. You all asked for a second part. Last week was incredible, such an incredible conversation. And tonight, I believe is going to be even better. We have Reverend Dr. Earle Fisher with us, and he is the author of the book, Reverend Albert Cleage Jr. in the Black Prophetic Tradition, a reintroduction of the Black Messiah. And this is just an incredible book, y'all. It is incredible. It is incredible. It's incredible. And this particular book is a groundbreaking book of sermons, the Black Messiah, and it reconfigures the rules of the game as it relates to Christianity and the social political realities of Black people in Detroit and across the country. And he's taking a rhetorical approach with this book. It explores how and what the Black Messiah has contributed to the broader landscape of Black liberation theology and Black religious rhetoric. And so I am excited that this is happening tonight. I see you all are already coming in the room, And so let me just start off by saying, we say good evening to you. And so people are here from New Egypt, New Jersey, Covington, Georgia, Paris, California, Kent, Washington, New Iberia, Louisiana. I know where that is. Raleigh, North Carolina, Tucker, Georgia, Atlanta, Georgia, St. Louis, Missouri, Charlotte, North Carolina. Oh, Reverend Dr. Reverend Frederick C. Hayes is here from Decatur, Georgia, San Francisco, California, Monroe, Louisiana, Benton Harbor, Michigan. And we're so happy. Chicago, Illinois. So y'all do me a favor, keep sharing and letting the folks know that we're here. And again, I said Chicago, Illinois. I see you all are texting me. I can't look at 3 devices at the same time. Folks is texting me at the same time. Kansas City, Missouri. I see you out here. I want to shout your state out. I know you want to represent where you are from. We're so glad that you are here with us tonight. Want to just let you know and give you a few rules of engagement. Tonight, we're going to be giving away a book, right? We're going to be giving away a book. And so we want to make sure that you put pound Beyond the Gatekeepers. It's type the hashtag pound Beyond the Gatekeepers. Along the way, we'll be announcing that through the evening. Also, if you have a question, when it's time for questions, we want you to put question, the word question, and then type your question so that we can recognize it more clearly. Good evening, Pastor Anthony Sullivan. Glad you're here. Houston, Texas is in the house. Long Beach, California is here. Richmond, California is here. Cali is in the house, y'all. Los Angeles, California is in the house. The West Coast is representing on tonight. Midwest is representing on tonight. So we want to make sure that we know where you're from. We want to make sure that you're sharing. We say hello to Facebook Live tonight. Yes, we say hello to YouTube. So glad you're here. We say hello to Twitter. And we are on 2 Facebook pages, which we have been, which is Beyond the Gatekeepers, and of course, Bishop Yvette A. Flunder's page. So there is no reason for you to miss us. No reason for you to miss us. I see you, Dante. Richmond, Virginia is here. San Diego, California is here. People are coming in. We want to give you time. We want to give you time to be here. We're so excited. This is good. We see you, and we appreciate you so very much. We ask you to continue to share on tonight. Let me just move this right along, as we've got questions. Again, Kansas City, Missouri. We see you, Pastor Tammy. We're so glad you're here. Baltimore in the building. That's what they told me. Washington, D.C. is here representing. So glad that you are all here with us tonight. And we are excited. Oh, my beloved friend Jeffrey Howard is here from South Carolina in the house. So glad that you're here. Colorado is here in the house. People want to hear what is going to be talked about on tonight. And so we want to give it to you. Let me bring on our guest. We have Reverend Dr. Earle J. Fisher in the house with us. We're so glad that you are here tonight. And of course, Bishop Flunder is not a guest. Bishop Flunder is here with us, as she is all the time. And Bishop Flunder is, amen. I see you, Bishop. Amen. We're glad that you're here tonight. And so, Bishop Flunder, I want to know if you want to have a few words. I've got some questions for Earle. For Reverend Earle. Sorry, Reverend Earle. Reverend Dr. Earle. I got some questions for the brother. And I know you got things that you want to say too, Bishop.
Well, good evening, everyone. And I have to tell you, we've already had a rather colorful pre-talk on tonight. Reverend Dr. Earle J. Fisher, PhD. I have to say to you, I am so pleased to have you joining us, and I love how your mind works. I love the way that you are able to connect the dots between those who went before us and those who are us in the present time and those who are coming after us. It's so important to the movement. And I also have some questions, a few things that I'd like to lift up. But I think what is important most to me right now is that we are reliving an experience that happened in many ways during the time that Reverend Albert Cleage was living, and many of the other freedom fighters whose names we call in so many services and settings around this time of year, in and around the celebration of Dr. Martin Luther King's Day. And I must say that I am concerned because history is repeating itself in some very interesting ways. But I'm concerned about our strategies to push back against it? Why weren't we prepared? Why didn't we anticipate it? And how did we get ourselves or allow ourselves to get in a situation like this? So there are some questions that I think are important to ask, and some ways in which we need to have clarity and specificity, not just about naming the issues, but also encouraging our people to action. What does that action look like? What do we need to do? Or all of these great preachers will have preached in vain. They will have died in vain. They will have done that hard work marching in vain if we are not moving forward. So I'm so glad to have Dr. Fisher here to talk with us about connecting the dots between what happened in that time that won us so many things that we have in so many ways found our way to slipping away from, both in terms of our protection of those realities and the political ploys that have been used against our community. So that's really what's in my mind and on my heart tonight, and as we continue to talk, not knowing altogether what Bishop-elect Vanessa has as her questions, but I've been musing about this off and on for the last couple of days. So good to have you here, brother, again.
It's an honor to be here. Thank y'all again. I want to first, based upon what y'all shared with me before we came on, send some love and support and condolences to Bishop Pearson, who couldn't be with us tonight, doing the work of the pastor as priest and journeying with people in times of bereavement. And so regretfully, we can't have a second episode of 3 bishops in the jack leg. We gotta have the first episode of 2 bishops in the jack leg. And I am still, I'm gonna sound like a real old school Baptist preacher. I'm elephantly elated, giraffe glad, and hippopotamus happy to be back with Beyond the Gatekeepers and Bishop Flunder. Your words of insight and inquiry are just, profound and sagacious as always. You are, somebody who I continue to applaud and appreciate for what you add to this wonderful chorus of freedom fighting. And as you talked about, not just what has happened in the past, but you've been able to help us connect some dots between the past and the present in some ways that are valuable. And so to hear you say that you appreciate what I'm offering and what I'm trying to provide as I try to run my leg of the race, I can't express my gratitude enough. And to you, Bishop-elect Vanessa, thanks. I don't care if y'all call me Earle or Pastor Earle or Dr. Fisher. White folks, though, put some respect on my name. So you're going to say doctor, especially when we don't have no direct relationship. That's just how that's going to be. I once heard Valerie Bridgman say that when folks don't put the doctor in front of her name, the doctor is absent. But when they don't put the doctor in front of some white folks' name, the doctor is just silent. So if anybody wants to try to be silent on my doctor, no, you're going to put some respect on my name. But y'all, I mean, we amongst family. So I don't mind. If that happens, y'all don't have to redress it. And to those who sent emails to purchase the book last week, I hope you saw the reply email, and I want to thank y'all for your patience. And we're excited about the level of interest that the book has had, and what I believe it continues to add to this conversation as Bishop Flunder was framing, insofar as how do we end up in a place where it seems like so many of us were caught off guard? And I think we'll spend some time talking about that tonight. And in the spirit of Dr. King, who we celebrated earlier this week, there's a whole chapter on Clegg's take on Dr. King and Brother Malcolm. So Dr. King, Brother Malcolm, and Black Power, that also considers the way the late, great, and venerable elder and ancestor James Hal Cone treated Martin and Malcolm in America. And that's a wonderful conversation, I think, for what's happening now. And I think it can shed some light on possibly, why we ended up in a space where so many of us are caught off guard, as if, as I said earlier this week, as if the insurrection is some scratch on the vinyl of American exceptionalism, when in fact it's stitched in the fabric and the fiber of the country. And not only the last 50 years, Bishop Flunder, when you start talking about what happened in the past that we kind of gained some progress from and some insight from insofar as what's happening today. But I keep thinking, and I had this conversation with a local pastor before, about an hour ago. Reconstruction, Lord have mercy. I mean, if you go look at some of the court proceedings during Reconstruction and some of the arguments that people were making from the House floor, the Senate floor, or the Supreme Court chambers, right? You see so many parallels today, and I think that's a sad state of affairs, but at the same time, it's insightful and instructive and provides us with an opportunity to make the tradition, the Black prophetic tradition, all the more righteous and all the more relevant. So again, thank y'all for allowing me to chop it up with y'all again. I'm grateful for this.
Thank you so much, Dr. Fisher. And I don't want to leave off Dayton, Ohio, Lancaster, Texas. I see you all, Minnesota. Thank you so very much. And Rwanda is here. We're so happy that you're here tonight. Grateful. Also, Mother Lucky. Again, I'm going to shout her out every time she come on. God bless you, Mother Lucky, for being here. Dr. Fisher, I want to start off with 3 quotes. And of course, I want Bishop Flunder to chime in. These are 3 quotes by Reverend Albert Cleage. And I want to hear you all expound. I think it's going to lead us in the direction that we want to go tonight. 3 quotes. The first thing he says is, any ministry to Black people which is not designed to effect their empowerment is designed to perpetuate their enslavement. Dr. Fisher, Bishop Flunder.
Madam, I mean, if I was at Abyssinian, I'd say the doors of the church are open. Come by letter, Christian experience.
I mean, that's the whole word of God, as far as I'm concerned. Absolutely. If it is not bringing liberty, and if it is not bringing freedom, and in anything, any institution, and that certainly includes institutions of government, it includes institutions of religion, any institution that is not setting people free, it has made itself an enemy of the people. And it has made itself an enemy of the will of God. I believe that with my whole heart. And I support any teaching. I support any teaching that liberates people from the things that are designed to bind us from being our best and highest selves. And I say that from the experience that I have with housing insecure drug addicts who are mentally ill. I'll do the best that I can to enhance, enlarge, and inform my colleagues, folks that work in our ministry in the church, folks that work in government, of their humanity. And I have to say that there are times we cannot succeed because some of those elements hinder them in many ways. But their humanity is the thing that we're going to lift up, and their rights, and the right as citizens of this country and citizens of God's creation, their rights to not only be helped, but to prosper and be in health, if you understand what I mean. And that doesn't mean that I can always win, or that they're not so far along that there's nothing in my hands, essentially, that I can give them, but to see them through the eyes of God suggests that that is our role and responsibility. So from that point all the way to what we hold people responsible for as it relates to government and hierarchy, both in government and in faith-based organizations and community organizations and all of that, that hierarchical concept does not come from what I believe to be the heart of God. And the heart of God is a heart of justice. So something is very wrong with that if we don't see that as being the supreme thing that we should be reaching for. If we don't do it, we do what we're doing now. We repeat. We go underground for a while. Then when we feel empowered by somebody who comes along who loves roaches, forgive me for saying it that way, we feel empowered, and here come the roaches again. They're not dead. They're just underground. I just need you to understand. And all you need is a roach captain to make it seem that it is safe to emerge from those dark and damp and sick and evil and wicked places. And from those places, here we go again, trying again and again to take down what it is that is just. Stop. I mean, we need to stop talking about heaven, Bishop Elect, until we're ready to bring heaven to earth. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth, as it is in heaven. There should not be a difference between the two when we have done our job for justice, the ways in which we have. So that's my Flunder response to your short question.
No, look, but that's a loaded citation in a sense. Like that's a dense statement that speaks not only to the type of convictions that I hear you describing, Bishop Flunder, like what our individual convictions are insofar as where we're going to stand, either on the side of justice or injustice, on the side of good or evil, on the side of liberation or oppression. But it is also a statement not just about conviction, it's a statement about constitution. How are we? How are our organizations? How are our institutions, including the Black church and Black churches, constituted? So those who do no, but for those who don't know, the book is a revision of sorts of my dissertation. In the opening, Bishop-elect V says something about me taking a rhetorical approach. This is my rhetorical approach to the theology of Albert Clegg. And that's important because theology, and I make this claim in the book, all theology is experiential because it takes place through human experience. It is contextual because that human experience takes place in a cultural, chronological, geographical context. And it's ultimately rhetorical because we find ways to communicate that experience in that cultural, chronological, and geographical context. So I'm taking these rhetorical presentations that were given in homiletical form from Albert Clegg and dissecting them in a way that shed light into how he was reconstituting his church, not just in name. He didn't just change the name from Central United Church of Christ to the Shrine of Black Madonna. He is reconstituting what the church stands for, why the church exists. He's doing it through, in rhetoric, we would call it hermeneutical rhetoric, right? He's instructing people on how to reinterpret what is being said in Scripture, who Jesus is, what is happening in the social and the political moment in which they live through the civil rights movement, the Black Power movement, rebellions that are taking place in Detroit and Newark and LA and in these major Black cities around the country. And so this is where we are again, Bishop Flunder. We are at a place where we have to reconstitute. If COVID didn't teach us anything, it should have taught us that it is time to reconstitute what our churches are. So many of our churches, if you read our constitutions, it reads just like so many white supremacists and white supremacist adjacent organizations and institutions. It just says Jesus and baptism and membership and, Sunday morning, or throw some perfunctory scriptures on it. But ultimately, this is what Clegg is getting at. Either you are for liberation or you're against it. Pick a side. There is no in between. Either you are for the full humanity and affirmation. You know what I really need? It's some Black preachers who need to hear this. You don't get to pick and choose who gets liberated. You don't get to say I'm for liberation of this group, but not that group. No. And so Clegg is saying you have to reconstitute. We have to reconstitute ourselves using that fundamental litmus test. Does it serve for the emancipation, empowerment, and liberation of God's people? If it does not, we cannot call it godly, and we shouldn't even call it church. So I appreciate that. And that's not, I know it's a short statement, but it ain't just about our individual convictions. Those are important. And those are usually where we center ourselves in conversations about the moral compass. But we also have to think about systemic and structural and institutional organizations and how we are, how is your Black church constituted? What in your constitution says we are for the liberation of God's people? And so that's where I feel like Clegg is trying to speak to us from the archives of eternity and says it's time for us to revisit some of this stuff. Some of us just need, it's time for you to revise your constitution and bylaws. Bring them into the 21st century. Bring them into the movement for Black lives. Hello. And maybe we will see, as I ended up last week saying, a larger increase in the number of preachers and pastors who are committed to Black liberation theology.
That is excellent. I just saw it and I said, I want to pull this out. And this is going to go down the street you all want to go down. I'm telling you. He says, if it supports the liberation struggle of Black people, then it is good. If it is in opposition to the liberation struggle of Black people, then it is bad. If it supports the liberation struggle of Black people, then it is moral. If it opposes the liberation struggle, then it is immoral. If it supports the liberation struggle of Black people, then it is the will of God. If it opposes the liberation struggle of Black people, then it is satanic. With this simple key to the mysteries of life, both events and institutions can be judged. And I just want to add on, they are being judged right now, which is why you don't see young people rolling up into the church like we used to. All right, I'm going to let Bishop Flunder and Dr. Earle go.
Bishop, let me just toss this to you with this little short phrase. Because if we despiritualize it, it's as simple as this. If somebody is being abused and you're right there, to be neutral, here's King, to be neutral at the time of injustice is to side with the one committing the injustice. So either you are actively for the liberation, or you're against it. And if we use that language of abuser and victim and think about the social and the political context of Black people in what Langston Hughes calls our yet to be United States of America, you have to ask the church. So are you working to protect those who are being victimized and abused by a system of structure, an institution, and a country founded on white supremacist ideals? Or are you trying to claim to be some moral, neutral figure? Well, to be silent in times of injustice, to be neutral in times of injustice, is to side with the oppressor. So from my vantage point, Bishop Flunder, that's where I see the clear dichotomy between what we claim the church is so often and what we actually need the church to be.
Absolutely. And being able to decolonize our minds and back to your point, our not only our minds, our doctrines, our constitutions, to decolonize them because they were written to be acceptable by the people who oppressed us. And so we still, and I also want to go so far as to say, if we can learn this well as humankind, we can supplant the word Black for whatever the oppressed people are. And I speak to that out of something that we talk to often in TFAM, that I'm a same gender loving woman. I'm a woman of African descent, and I'm a woman. Now, several other things, but I lift those up because those three things are under attack almost equally in this nation, and equally by the same people, most of which suggest that they know God and that they are just people. I'm one of those women. My body is my body. It's not up to anybody to tell me what to do with and for my body. But if I talk about that, I'm in a whole other, that adds another problematic, essentially, for the people who name the name of God during this time. So if we can grab this template and really embrace what it is that you're talking about and what came from the great preachers, like in so many ways, like Reverend Albert, and all of the things that happened through many of the folks who came before us, and not find ourselves drinking the Kool-Aid ourselves. We drink the Kool-Aid. We drink the Kool-Aid of the oppressor because when the oppressor drinks the Kool-Aid, it seems to work for him or her. But then we constantly revisit. So I have a question out there. I have a question. What would our ancestors say about this time and its similarity to the voting rights issues of our history? What would they say to us if they could speak to us directly from our next, from eternity? What would they say? What would be the words that they would say to us? Because we should have evolved as a nation and as a people who are responding to a nation. We should have evolved. So all of those things that I am, that people are trying to diminish, demean, destroy, all of those things that I am, that have borne in so many ways the ire and the anger and the frustration and the hatred of people in religion. What would they say? What would our ancestors say about how we are performing as people of faith around these issues? I would love to hear Reverend Earle tell me what he thinks what would they be saying back to it?
Some of this is funny because one of our wonderful and impeccable colleagues, Reverend Dr. Gina Marcia Stewart, who I call Auntie Gina, because of her relationship with my pastor, Frank Anthony Thomas, they're like brother and sister, so I always call her Auntie. I had the pleasure of preaching for her this Sunday on MLK Sunday, and part of what I concluded was when Jesus is on the Mount of Transfiguration, this is a moment of African ancestral veneration. And so it's him talking to his ancestors, preparing to do the work of revolution. And so you posing this question, I think, centers on the similar sentiment that I tried to raise then. But in a more comical way, when you were talking, I started thinking about Aaron Magruder and the way he portrayed Martin King coming back from the dead in Boondocks. And King says at some point, "Will you niggas please shut the hell up?" You know, it's like at some point, it's like, what are you doing? Like what is wrong? We spent, you said something, Bishop Flunder, about where we are insofar as the issue of voting rights. And if you scroll down your timeline, Sunday into Monday, most of what we were talking about was spit. That's what most folks were talking about, spit. Spit and spectacle. And I think some of our ancestors would say, what the hell is wrong with y'all? Other ancestors would say probably what Alan Bosack says God is going to say to us when we arrive at the gate with no scars. Was it nothing to fight for? You couldn't find anything to fight for? No cause? Worth nothing? Like God is not going to ask for your ministerial resume or your credentials, but show me your scars. And I think that's what the ancestors are saying now.
Yes.
You know, where are your scars? Because there's too much for us to fight for, to be overly concerned with spit and spectacle. And we are investing so much of and all of us have limits to our time, all of us have limits to our power, all of us have limits to our knowledge. So we have to decide like where we're going to invest that stuff. And with what the ancestors bequeathed to us, I think they would be asking us or calling us into account in a sense, and saying, well, based upon what you were given and based upon what we have, how did we get here? And what are we going to do about it? That's what I think with, you know, what we might call in our tradition, my Holy Ghost imagination. I think that's what they would be saying.
That's excellent. And it was a great question, Bishop Flunder, which leads me to this. When we talk about politics and really what's happening now, you say, Dr. Earle, one thing is that to try to oversimplify the relationship between people's politics and religion only serves to maintain the people who are in positions of power and authority because they have blended their politics and their religion. For example, white nationalists, white Christian nationalists, from the governor's mansion, you say, of Tennessee to the former occupant of the White House and all around the country, people are in those positions because they wed together their religion and their politics. One of the things that Klieg is making explicit is people cannot engage, and this is my part right here, in a political struggle if they have an apolitical theology. I need you to say more, Dr. Fisher and Bishop.
Look, I used to be at a place, I think I said this last week, I used to be at a place be like, man, I wish I had wrote that. And I'm like, oh, right?
Nah, bro, you wrote it.
Let me go back to what I heard Bishop Flunder saying earlier about just naming it. We got to do more than just naming it, right? Because what the contemporary landscape of Black church and Black preaching did was try to adopt a posture of social justice that simply named the issues. And so Clegg is saying, and I'm saying, and I believe Bishop Flunder and others of us are out here saying, okay, you're not being prophetic simply because you're doing a drive-by of the social issues. You might be socially conscious. Okay, that's a step in the right direction. But that's not the end goal. The end goal is to speak in ways that call power into account and also empower those who have been rendered powerless. And so in order for us to get there, you have to do more than just name something. You have to analyze the power dynamics. And if you start analyzing the power dynamics in our society, what you discover is those people who are in the highest positions of power, the same people who Bishop Flunder was saying ultimately orchestrate all of the oppressions and then compel us to be in oppression Olympics one with another to try to figure out who is getting the worst end of the stick instead of angling our attention at the oppressor. So the people who are orchestrating our oppression are people who are unapologetic in their commitment to their faith. And their faith is white nationalist Christianity. So I say in the book that not only is all theology rhetorical, experiential, contextual, and rhetorical, all theology is political because it is ultimately concerned about power. For God has not given us a spirit of fear, but one of power and of love and of a sound mind. God is able to do exceedingly and abundantly above all we can ask or think. Here's the part most people leave out. According to the power at work within us. So theology is ultimately concerned with the negotiation of divine and human power. But here we go, being so apolitical. Don't talk about politics from the pulpit. What you think the cross is, fool? You know, don't talk about don't mix religion and politics. I mean, that's stupid. Can I just say that? Like that's stupid. Because it is not true to the biblical witness, it's not true to history. And even if it was true, back to the other point, even if it was true of the biblical witness, I'd say get rid of it. If it was true to the tradition, I'd say so what? Because I still believe God's ultimate concern is God's people's liberation. And so if I can't find it within the sacred text, if I can't find it within the history, I believe God is calling me to create it right now because that's how committed to it I think we ultimately have to be.
Just one quick thing, because I'm raised in the Pentecostal church, as you know, and one of the things that we were taught consistently is to learn to suffer. You have to learn to suffer. There's salvific value in suffering. And some of us suffer more, we're taught to suffer more than others, you know, especially women in particular. It was our God-given role and responsibility to suffer in silence, suffer quietly, and trust God and pray and wait until God made a way. And it was the same way that we interacted with Miss Lady that we worked for. We interacted on our jobs. We interacted. And the more you learn to suffer, the more you please God. And I can remember it Shirley and I were talking about the other day, just echoing in my ears. Honey, you have got to learn to suffer. Because if you don't suffer, you're not going to reign with God. You got to suffer. And I had this conversation with my sainted mother, who is among the ancestors now. She was talking about, Yvette, some things you just get. And I said, Mama, I don't want to suffer. And I certainly don't want to go looking for it. I don't want to go expecting it and welcoming it and letting people, wearing a sign, letting people know that I'm sufferable, essentially. And anything you want to bring me, you can bring me. I said, suffering is overrated. And I do not believe that God has chosen this for one gender or for one race or for one people. And if that's the case, why do the other people not have to suffer? What is that? So she thought about it for a minute, as my mother would do. And she turned, she said, that's the truth. She said, something's wrong with that. I said, yes, something is completely wrong with that. But it is so in us that we honestly believe that it makes us more powerful spiritually. And we can't connect the dots that was the principal bondage. That was the chain that held us in slavery. Until we could sing that before I be a slave, I be buried in my grave, and I go home to my God and be free. I will not allow you to continue to make me feel that I am less than. That is just not, if it cost me my life, that was the liberation of the mind, which led to the liberation or leads to the liberation of the body. But my sainted mother was taught to believe, just like I was taught to believe, you must suffer to please God. And you almost have to go hunt you some suffering. If you can't find some suffering, if you don't look like you're going through anything, you're not truly echoing, essentially, and the type. This was so important about how you just exegeted those passages. The type was Jesus. Well, Jesus had to suffer. But at whose hands? And for what reason? Hallelujah to God. Empire and religion killed Jesus. Empire and religion got together, got married to one another. They supposed to have hated one another, but they got together, and they together killed Jesus, executed him in first with a puppet trial and a public execution, because they got together. Now, that is just suffering. If you want to do something to me, let it be because I'm pushing back against injustice. Come for me. Now, don't be careful, because I may come for you too, but what I'm saying is,
try me,
because I'm licensed. So it may be important for me to say that. So when you come for me, be mindful that I'm not going to sit down and just let you have me in that way. But if I must suffer, if I must be publicly crucified, as I have been time and again, let it be for something, not just to somehow look more holified, because I have kept silence and I don't want to talk back to government, and I don't want to talk back to the pastor, and I don't want to talk back to the bishop, and I don't want to say anything essentially to people who are carrying sick, poor, and bad religion in the name of the one who was killed and murdered. And Jesus said it. I said from time to time, but he said it. When they said they're laying down their robes for you, Jesus, and they have a donkey that they want you to ride on, and they're throwing palm fronds at you, and they're calling you Messiah when you are, and Jesus said, not, well, isn't that nice? He said, except a tree, except a seed die in the ground, it will not bring forth. The seed of the tree has to fall into the ground and die, or it will not bring forth fruit. And if I be lifted up from the earth, I'll draw all humankind unto myself. And the message was in the middle of the party. He knew, I'm going to pay a price for this party. Just like I believe that Reverend Albert Cleese, there's a price to pay for that party. And the consequence was a public execution. Let's be clear. Let's be clear. He knew it when he was walking down the street. Mm-hmm. He knew it would go from Hosanna to crucify him, and not long after that. Such is the way I believe that our ancestors have suffered. And if we will cheapen their suffering,
oh God,
cheapen and have it under our feet, cheapening their suffering by allowing this foolishness to happen again and not use the power to change this moment that we spitting, you said it, and acting a fool in all kind of different ways right now. If we will not take this moment to venerate in so many ways those who gave their lives to give us the option and fight like hell, because we're going to have to fight, because this is the last big breath for a lot of this stuff. We got to fight. We got to fight like everything we have and everything we do depends on it. Now, forgive me for having that moment, but
no, that's beautiful.
No, y'all got these moments, and I'm good with it. Let me say one more thing, because I know Reverend Dr. Fisher's ready to go in. Listen, you all are watching. I ask you to do me one big favor. Please share. If you're on Facebook Live, if you're on YouTube, if you are on Twitter, please give us another big boost. Please share, because this conversation is a real live conversation. It's a wealth of knowledge. You want to share with those who you've been having conversations with at coffee hour. You've been talking about these things all along. Please share this Facebook Live. Dr. Fisher?
Yeah, I was going to say, for those who heard us talk last week, I shared a story about what Maxine Smith said insofar as us being unwilling to tell the story of the struggle. And here's what I think happens, Bishop Flunder. You can tell me what you think about this. I think we confuse struggling with suffering. See, the way that, as Clegg would say, the slave theology, which requires this redemptive suffering. I'm talking about this in chapter 5 of this book because Cone engages in some of this. This was one of King's staples. Now, we don't have to talk about it all today, but this is one of his main staples. This is why white folks love him so much, because he was deeply convicted and convinced that black folks would be redeemed because we were willing to suffer like Jesus suffered. Now, there is an element of struggle, and here's what I hear you describe, Bishop Flunder, when you're talking about what it means for us to fight against these evil forces. That is the commitment to the struggle. That's not necessarily some commitment to a suffering that we believe. And the question that I think that you raised that is so pertinent, because it's a question that we have to ask ourselves, and we can ultimately ask God, because I believe all of us on here believe that God is big enough to handle these types of questions. Is, so if suffering is the prerequisite for some elevation and escalation and promotion, why come all of these folks who ain't suffering much still seem to be in positions of power and control?
Preach.
Because at some point, you're going to have to say, it's enough time to call it, okay? It's been long enough. Clearly, this ain't it. Clearly, this ain't the formula. And if we trace the theological and rhetorical histories of this stuff, what you discover is this is the way in which white evangelicalism imposed its perspective on the black faith tradition and community, and convinced us not only to believe it, but to impose it upon our own people. And so now we still struggling with this redemptive suffering thing that we just claim but really don't believe.
Yes.
So I think what Clegg is challenging us to do is, even when it's us, even when it's our patron saints,
Yes.
we have to struggle with what our deepest convictions are to ensure that they are aligned more directly with love and liberation, and not just some abstract, theoretical pontification on what God is going to do if we're willing to sacrifice our own humanity and disconnect our theology from our sociology and our anthropology and our psychology and our political science. I don't think God is asking us to do that.
I don't either. And I will fight you.
I'm going to say fight.
I will whoop your ass. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. No,
Meet
I'm just gonna fight you.
Meet me on the playground.
No. Okay, I digress.
For my right and the rights of my people to be, I will come for you. There's no question about that. And if you don't know, look me up. Run, tell somebody. We will. I will fight. There's no question about it, because I know it's the thing to do. Passivity is not the answer to many things. It's just not the answer to so many things. I'm going to say it again. Passivity is not the answer to and it's many ways to fight. But when people come for you, come for your race, when they come for your gender, when they come for your family, when they come for your neighborhood, when they pump nasty water in your pipes, when they kick you off the bus, and it happens over and over and over again, it does not please God for us to be passive. And that whole concept about being passive pleases God. To your point, it's as though it's only for those who are trodden underfoot. It is not what is supposed to happen for people who are not. We will fight you. Tell somebody that you heard us tonight say, we will fight you.
If you quote me, say, he said he will whoop your ass.
WHOOP. Whoop.
Yeah.
Let's be very, very clear.
Look, y'all remember last week we talked about the ways in which white, especially academic and ecclesiastical gatekeepers, curate the conversation of our elders and our ancestors. So what you're describing, Bishop Flunder, anybody who has studied the history of the movement would know. Negroes with guns, Robert Smith, Robert Witt, right? We shoot back. That nonviolent stuff will get you killed, right? All of these things, beacons of defense, all of these things document the people of faith who were willing to fight in not only moral ways. I'm never dismissing moralism as something that is irrelevant. What I argue in like essays like Sermonic Militancy is moralism alone has never won us anything. They have to know that you are willing to whoop their ass, right? You might not have to do it, but if they don't believe that you will, you can best well believe they're gonna try to whoop yours and keep everything from you that God ordains for us. Lastly, right quick, Bishop, because you're bringing up some wonderful scriptural references that we need to do a better job of exegeting and interrogating. Because if I'm trying to build an army because my community is small and we don't have the resources, when I say thou shalt not kill, I mean don't kill a Hebrew, because we got to fight against the, if I say turn the other cheek, it's hey, we don't have time to fight each other because we got a bigger fight that we need to be engaged in. It's not, to your point, Bishop, it is not the theology of passivism. That's a blasphemous theology. That's a blasphemous theology.
I'm with you. And there is fear. I know, Bishop.
Go ahead.
There's a fear out there. People would not try to gut our rights to vote if there was no fear. The fear is that these folks will come for us. So what we'll do is come up with some way to make or dismantle or destroy their ability to vote. And sometimes I think about it, that somehow people really still think that kind of thing works. that if you stop us from being able to vote, if you cut off our ability to vote, think about that. The voting laws, how these new voting laws in places like Texas and in other places, you can't bring a bus
Tennessee.
You can't bring a bus within three blocks of the polls. You can't give people sandwiches. And I want to tell people, what do y'all think we're going to do?
You can't give them water. They tripping.
What are we going to do? We're going to park the bus 3 blocks away, and then we're going to walk 3 blocks, and we're going to give the people a sandwich on the bus so they can take it with them. Essentially, what we have learned is a workaround.
That's right.
Once we realize who we are, we realize that it's an exercise in futility for the people who are trying to stop us to stop us. It's but the foolishness, the childishness of thinking that you can hinder our vote by keeping the bus 3 blocks away from the polls and the chicken sandwiches 3 blocks away from the polls, and you think that we won't be able then to rally, and everybody that's listening to us needs to hear this. However this thing works, whatever is at the end of the day, whatever we have to do to keep in place the freedoms that our ancestors fought for, we need to do what we need to do. Whatever it is, we get the old people, get the young people, and more young people voting than have voted at this age in the history of voting. Let's get them all out there. Let's get everybody out there and do what we have to do. If it means that the chicken sandwiches are 4 blocks away, we know how to walk 4 blocks away. I'm with Barbara on this. They think that's the kind of thing that will make it win. No, what that will do is rile us up, I pray, to remember who we are, and that we will take back from us those things that have been stolen from us, as versus waiting somewhere for somebody to pity us and bring it back to us. That is not the way to fight this war, not this one. It's like Albert Cleave fought it. You name it, you declare it, you insist on it, you suffer for it if you need to, and you make it happen. That is the time that we live in right now. That is the time. I love Earle Fisher. I love me some Earle Fisher.
Yeah.
Feeling is mutual, Bishop.
They said
Jesus called them vipers. He called them vipers. I said that was cussing in his time. I love me some Earle Fisher. All right.
Nancy Kingwood, I know you see that. We will fight. I know you will fight. Thank you very much. Sonia Williams says the power dynamics in Black religious organizations and institutions are primitive and uplift supremacy. We cannot keep the oppressor's model and slap affirming on top of it. Hello. And so, Dr. Fisher, we have 4 questions for you.
Oh, God.
One says, should we move from singing these useless civil rights songs like "We Shall Overcome Someday"? Is it time to check our calendar and cash in on the someday? That someday is long overdue.
Well, I think that I feel a certain level of dismissiveness in that inquiry that I don't think is true to the best of the Black prophetic tradition. 2 things right quick. One, no matter what freedoms you secure, you still gonna have to fight to keep. So to say we shall overcome someday is not simply saying we'll never get there. It's saying you have to be mindful of what it takes to obtain the freedoms and the privileges that you have. So liberation is not an immediate destination. It's an eternal journey. So sometimes you fight to get there. Sometimes you fight to stay there, right? The other thing is, and this is where African traditional religion and a centering of the Black experience is helpful, because you can decode some of these songs and realize what you think our elders and ancestors were saying is not what our elders and ancestors were saying. Okay? The reason we started singing Dr. Watts is because we were singing in code so that the slave master did not know we leaving tonight at 6 o'clock. So I don't want to dismiss some of the songs of the civil rights movement as much as I want us to add to the chorus of those wonderful songs more contemporary songs like Kendrick Lamar's "We Gonna Be All Right," you know, and some others that I could think about that I quote from some hip hop folks. But I think it's important for us to find a way from an intergenerational context to not, I can't stand the phrase "I am not my ancestors." Nigga, is you crazy? You must not know your ancestors, or I am not my ancestors, sincerely sign these hands. You don't know your ancestors. So when we learn more about some of the language, the rhetoric that our community spoke to try to decode some of the plans and often put them into song, then I think we might have a better appreciation for some of this stuff.
Thank you, Dr. Fisher. The next question, this is for both of you all. What malignant psychological effects via doctrine has the Black church had on its congregants, and what would it take for them to experience positive conscious raising transformation while breaking the chains of a doctrine that is steeped politically and culturally in an old mindset?
I can tell you what I feel about this, and it's something I think we've talked about before, Bishop Vanessa, in my experience working with apartheid in South Africa and the experience of working in Zimbabwe, and when it was Rhodesia, essentially, and eventually became Zimbabwe. Two African leaders, if you let me say, one, Mandela being one, and the reality of how they handled how to get the usurper essentially out of their country. On one hand, you have a group of people who were freedom fighters, and when they became freedom fighters who won and got their country back, they sent all of the white people and all of the machinery that made Zimbabwe the breadbasket of South Africa. They put them out, made them take their stuff, but they didn't know how to run the machines. They didn't know how to replicate, how to have a massive industry of farming. So they became subsistence farmers again with broken down machines, the ones that did remain just rotting essentially in the field because they didn't know how to do that. And before long story short, they lost their whole dollar. Their dollar was devalued until now the coin of the realm is the US dollar in what was Rhodesia and is Zimbabwe. Nelson Mandela had a whole different concept. And the concept was, what do we do to move toward benefiting from the people who were the ones who usurped our land, our diamonds, our minerals, our land, and our people? What is it that we do at the end of apartheid that moves us toward where we really do want to be? Because their presence can be utilized in our moving forward. We send them all home. We send the De Beers home. Let me just put it that way. The diamond people. So if we send them all home and all of the things that they have and so forth and so on, what does that do to our economy? So we have the land. And he worked with the leaders of a number of these organizations. First, to practice equality in who they hired, practice equality in what they gave people when they essentially left at the end of retirement, practice equality in building. I was there when Soweto was shantytown. Now Soweto is houses. There are houses in places that used to be shanties, significant houses, not just lean-to houses, not just made up of stuff you got from the rubbish heap. What does that mean? It means that the intention was that we will build back better. We will be better in some ways for having had this storm that we intend to never have happen again, by getting and learning some of the businesses that we did not know and getting what we should get from those businesses for our people equally. Soweto wasn't over overnight, okay? It took a minute to lift it. It was right next to Alexandria. You know what I mean? Super rich, look over the freeway, super poor. But now it's hard to tell the difference between one and the other. I guess what it is that I'm saying, how do we use those lessons not to feel that somehow or another we need to copy the oppressor by wearing English cut suits to look like we have now arrived, but we don't know how to till the ground that is now our ground. We haven't learned how to till the ground. There's some lessons to be learned about how to manage money. Hallelujah to God. And make it work for you. Everybody doesn't have to first be a drug dealer before they're rich. There's some other ways that we can have wealth. But we have to understand the process. We have to understand, how does money work? How does it work in this country? And how does it work between this country and other countries? So now we're talking Bitcoin. We're having a lot of different kinds of conversations, but it's a very different time. But the principle is the same. Mandela did wise things. All of the leadership till now in Zimbabwe, I believe, is not doing wise things. That is where my heart is. What can we learn and do wise things such that we can change this paradigm for our people?
Dr. Fisher, somebody's asking you about reconstruction and recalibration. Recalibrating, sorry.
Yes, I think so. That is actually what I just heard Bishop Flunder describe. What those terms actually are in praxis. So the malignant theology of white evangelicalism is what made our people so docile, so disconnected from the struggle for Black liberation, and actually deified sacrifice and suffering in a way that works against us long term. So what do we need to do? And this is what Bishop is describing. You have to recalibrate, which is to stop and reset yourself. So this is something that this pandemic has allowed us an opportunity to do insofar as the Black faith communities are concerned. And what's sad, I'll just say right quick, is so many of us before the pandemic was talking about how what the church was doing was not working, only for the pandemic to hit and us to try to rush back to do what we said we were doing that was not working. So to recalibrate means to stop and reset yourself and to look at in a different way, in a different perspective, as Bishop Flunder was talking about, like, is to review all of the things that had gotten us to the point to where we are. And to reconstitute yourself means to say, to shift and change your fundamental convictions and practices. Because if I realize, what is it? I think it's Albert Einstein, or whoever said, Albert Einstein said, the clinical definition of insanity is to do the same thing over and over again and expect a different result. If you don't reconstitute yourself, you can recalibrate a million times, but you're going to go right back to the same habits and practices and the same oppressive methodologies that you are emulating from the ones who told you to suffer and you'll be redeemed. And suffer in silence, by the way. Just be peaceful when you suffer. If you don't ever reconstitute yourself, you're just going to repeat those oppressive practices. So what we must do is recalibrate, reconstitute ourselves, and we have to make these types of presentations and this type of material, if you will, more accessible to the general public. This is why last week I was challenging us to think again about what it is we're preaching on Sundays, what it is we're teaching in Bible studies, if we're having Bible studies, what we're spending time on our social media timeline talking about. Can I say it one more time? We spent time talking about spit and spectacle because so many of us want to be celebrities so bad that whatever the hot button topic is, we feel like we got to comment on. And meanwhile, the oppressor is 50 steps ahead. And the last thing they thinking about is whatever you little Negroes down there talking about spit and spectre. They talking about suppression and insurrection. So hopefully we can get to a place where not only are we recalibrating and reconstituting, but we're making these things more readily available and accessible to the general public so that we can at least introduce some of it. I would hope that in 5 or 10 years, 50 to 75% of Black churches at least know what Black liberation theology is, even if they're not going to preach it, but at least know something about it, know what womanism is, know what, we should at least know. So hopefully
I think that was good, because it brings me to this statement that you make, Dr. Fisher. You said, I think it is important the way we shape Black theology, which has to be centered on the lived experience of people in Black communities, people who are connected to Black institutions and Black organizations, and people who sincerely love Black families enough to sacrifice to sustain them. Because Cleave's Black theology is not simply some ideological or philosophical musing. It's something that has to be practical, for him to even say pragmatic. And hopefully you say this book, your book, continues to challenge not just Black communities,
right?
Not just Black academics, but Black faith leaders who claim to love Black people, but do not seem to love Black theology and are way too dismissive of radical Black politics. I need y'all both to say more.
And you heard me say before that Howard Thurman's church is a little church right here on Polk Street in San Francisco.
Yep.
Because what he was not trying to do, he was not trying to develop a mega church.
Right.
He wasn't trying to do that.
Right.
And if we take this road that the Reverend Earle Fisher is talking about right here, the Reverend Dr. Earle Fisher, if we take this road, it's going to hit a whole lot of these mega churches in the gut in terms of truly freeing people. Because when people are free and they're not connected to believing that somehow they are falling in the hands of an angry God, if they are not a part of a mega church, in a mega. And I'm not hating on people. I need you to hear what I'm saying, okay? I'm not hating on people who are actually called to that. But it seems that the more injection of actual boots on the ground justice work, the more the injection of that comes into the people's hearts and minds, the less they are concerned about the welfare of the institution. They're more concerned about doing the justice work out in the world, in the marketplace, in the places in which people live and move. That is the fear. You got a big building, you got a master mortgage, you got an incredible staffing load, you got incredible utilities to pay, you got to buy gas for your plane that you fly. You have an enormous amount of expense that's associated with keeping that institution afloat. And if you start talking like this, start having these conversations that came from this book, that is a book about a real human being that walked from one kind of thinking to another kind of thinking, there is a cost to pay. And there are not many people who are successful in this that are willing to be Carlton Pearson. Can I just say that in his absence? Who knew when he told the truth about what he really believed. And we were sitting together in a room at a hotel at a conference that we were at, talking about this. And I said, Carlton, if you take hell from these people, if you tell these people that you don't believe in hell, and you take hell from these people, you have taken the boogeyman. You have taken the fear factor that makes people get in the $1,000 line. This was a conversation that we had. The thing that makes people terrified that if they disagree with their pastor, that they're going to the hottest part of hell. If you take from them hell, they won't have anywhere to send the people if the people don't obey. And he said, well, I just don't believe in it, Yvette. I don't believe in a God that would. So we talked about the construct, and we talked about, you know what we talked about, how it came up and why it's in the Bible, and how it's, and what the folks have made out of it, and you got to have a boogeyman in it. And we went on and on and on and on about it. But he paid. This was not a sort of mega pastor with a sort of mega movement, where the people think they really got something. He was the black poster boy for the white evangelical conservative movement, voting and supporting Republicans all the way down the line. And he had an encounter with the Holy Ghost. Can I just say it that way? He had an encounter with the Spirit of God. And the College of Pentecostal Bishops threw him out. And they weren't white. They weren't white. But if you take hell, people hell was the thing that kept us slaves. Hell is what keeps subservient women. Hell is what terrifies gay people. Hell. It's the whole concept of an angry, vengeful, fly off the chain God that will get you.
White.
Yes.
White God. White slave master God.
Pissed off, angry, vengeful. That was the way it was taught. He had the courage to do it. Now he's on top again in so many ways. But that is an example. When we start talking like this and encouraging people to grab hold to the thoughts that are part of your book, we are also saying to them, you got to get ready to lose some of that.
Must Jesus better cross alone and all the world go free? See, we say this stuff without really paying attention to, take up your cross and follow Jesus. Ain't that what our elders and ancestors saying too?
That's what you
said. You said something about Howard Thurman, and I just have to say as an aside, one of his predecessors at the Church for the Fellowship for All People, while he was still finishing his dissertation, was a brother by the name of Albert Clegg Jr.
Of course.
Yeah. So, y'all can read about that. I say a little bit about that in my book, a little bit about Clegg being one of his predecessors. So that's an aside. The other thing that came to mind, Bishop, as you was talking about this notion of hell and the white theology of it all, is what Tupac said. For those who listen to Tupac said, we probably in hell already. Our dumb asses not knowing everybody kissing ass to go to heaven ain't going. Then he said, the preacher wants me, watch this. The preacher wants me buried. Why? Because I know he a liar. Have you ever seen a crackhead? That's eternal fire. That's the type of theology that I think resonates with our people in some ways force us to be recalibrated and reconstituted. I'll say this in conclusion to your point about Bishop Pearson and mega ministry in general. What I think we are living into right now is a moment where we have to reevaluate the metrics of ministerial success. Because if what it has been is simply our access to what some call bodies, buildings, and budgets. Frank Thomas calls it cash, cameras, and crowds. I've been saying more recently prosperity, popularity, and pleasure. If that's what we're after, you can trust me when I tell you it is building a house on sand. Because the way that you have to compromise your commitment to liberation to obtain it at that level, with very few exceptions, the way that you have to do it, and this is why I said earlier, so many of us want to comment on spit and spectacle because we ultimately want to be celebrities. And we think giving a hot take on whatever is the thing is actually going to increase the accessibility to those. It's triumphal. It's not liberation. It's triumphalism. You don't want a more just system. You just want a better seat on the bus of injustice. And what we have to do is say, no, we want to snatch the engine out the bus. We want to tear the whole thing down.
Take the tires off.
Take the tires off. And that's what I'm thinking. So maybe ministerial success is being in a place where you have the autonomy and the audacity to snatch the wheels off, instead of being so scared that if you snatch the wheels off, then that's going to stop everybody from joyriding off of the cliff in which we're headed in the first place. So that's something that I feel like too, Bishop Flunder. And I am not one to volunteer someone else for something. And anything that I speak on, I'm willing to try to work on too. So I'm saying this insofar as I am affirming your stature and public persona. I do think you can leverage your voice in ways that people can acknowledge and appreciate more. This conversation about reevaluating ministerial metrics for success, because you have some credentials and some experiences and some ethos and some character and ethics that can help establish it in ways that others, if they haven't been through what you've been through, and if they haven't obtained what you obtained, it's like I told people I got a PhD in part to tell people it don't mean much. But you can't really say that if you don't have one, because people say they just saying that because you don't have it, right? You have had, Bishop, a level of ministerial success by just about every measure. So I think you can say with a certain level of gravitas, no, what you think is mega ain't mega. Because I know this to be true. There are churches that are small in size, but strong in witness, so strong that they end up being mentioned in the same sentence with some of the mega churches in local vicinities. And so I think that that's something that you can help us try to accomplish, because ultimately, if we don't shift our focus from membership intake to ministerial impact, we'll continue to dive down this road of triumphalism and oppression and injustice by other names.
We have to bring Dr. Fisher to our leadership meeting in July, Bishop-elect Vanessa.
Yes, ma'am.
Or TFAM.
Yep.
Because that's the heart of it. Have you got good religion?
Now, I said I wasn't going to volunteer you for something. You just volunteered me. No, but
yeah,
you can volunteer. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, I got you because you got mine. That's what it's like. But we have to bring him, because it's about building again.
Yes.
It's about finding the correct foundation and building again. We have got to build. What we built on is not success in the eyesight of God for many people who are looking at that model, thinking that that's what it is that they want. And that's what it is that is the evidence of success. That's what we need to talk about. Have you got good religion with a question mark? Have you got good religion? It's about time to really lean in. So we want everybody to know we're going to Phoenix in July. To the Biltmore Hotel, Lord willing, and we can travel, because we have to deal with what may be the realities of the virus. But we are going to Phoenix in July. We only have about 200 rooms, so it's not a major event, but we'll be able to have about 400 to 500 people in double space, and we can get a few more rooms. And if it's 200 of us, we'll be real comfortable. Let's just put it that way. I think the important thing for me to say as we're reaching out to leaders, and we want you all to hear us say that as TFAM is the host, but it is an opportunity for all of us to spend some time talking about our what's next. We are in a living reformation. We are writing Acts 2 with our bodies. And it is time for us to respond to what it is that we've heard from this great man tonight.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Bishop-elect.
Indeed. And so we're going to wrap this conversation. But before we do that, we know we want to give away his book. And so we want you to type hashtag Beyond the Gatekeepers. That's hashtag Beyond the Gatekeepers if you want to win the book. And I'm going to ask the final question. It's been sitting here, and there's some other ones, but I feel like we'll just keep going and going and going. I know I need to cut it off. So this is a very simple one. Does passivity equal nonviolence?
What you think, Bishop Flunder? I think there's some similarities, there's some differences, and there's some differences that make a difference.
I don't think so altogether. I can see that, like to your point, that there are some similarities. There's some. I think that passivity is pulling back from the issue in my thinking, and to some degree self-protection. Nonviolence means fight another way, but fight. There are ways to fight, and perhaps fight another way may mean that I'm going to let you go home with your head, but you're going to know you've been in a scuffle. Let's put it that way. So I think that I don't see them exactly the same. Nonviolence is not saying that I will not fight. It just means that I will not fight in every way, or perhaps I will not fight in the way that you're trying to beckon me into the fight. But passivity, I think, suggests that I'm not going to join the fray. What I'm going to do is I'm going to fold up my Psalmbook and Bible and go home. I don't see them in my own thinking as being the same thing.
I'm in the same vein. I would refer to Clegg, who discusses in his sermon on Dr. King and Black Power, that nonviolence was still confrontational. He even said that King stirred up in some scary Negroes the courage to confront. And I don't think pacifism is willing to confront in the ways that nonviolence, as King practiced it, does intentionally confront. And I think we have to be mindful of how fear and cowardice are often, not always, but often the undercurrent for passivity, whereby nonviolence, to your point, I think, Bishop Flunder, is just the way many of us have been conditioned to try to talk about means of confrontation and community organizing and civil rights activism. But it's just not the only way. So no, I don't think they're exactly the same.
Thank you both. And before I move on, somebody wants to revisit the concept of what's involved with creating a new canon. That's a whole nother episode. I can honestly say that I don't think that we can really, or can you, Bishop Flunder?
No, we have two jobs. I think that we have, we need to have a real honest, open critique of the scriptures as they are, and begin to lift up to people what we really believe is inconsistent with the heart of God, what was a part of the realities, social and political realities, and stop beating up the fact that human beings wrote what they believed at a certain time and place because it was their reality. But it does not all speak the heart of God. That's one piece of it. Then I think that we should have a canon conversation, because I think there's enough books out there now for us to come together on just about every major concern, put it together and publish it, and call it a fresh canon, not be afraid to say that. And then we'll have to die. Like I said, before anybody will really take it seriously. You got to die. Nobody gonna take it seriously. They don't hollow your work, not really till you're dead. So then when you die, then the generation is coming after us will say, but it said in Testament 3, such and such and such and such, because that's really all that happened in the first doing of this. It's not a great mystery. We are now pushing back against the text. We've done it time and again in this conversation tonight, but we're pushing back against societal norms for that time. We're pushing back against imperialism for that time. We're pushing back. So let's write something and say something, or at least gather the writings, gather excerpts from the writings that address these issues, issue by issue. This one will be on this. This one will be on this. And I believe that it is time. We owe it to our children. If we don't do it, they're going to cut religion loose altogether, because they will read the text that we are saying is infallible in many of our churches, and they'll say, hell no. There's no way in the world that I'm going to be able to embrace this. If this is infallible, then I don't really want to read the rest. Now, I'll say it until they stone me at the gate, but I think it is time for us to take the same courage that the other writers did and accumulate the writings and write some fresh writings and make it available to our next generation. I believe that. I do believe that.
Thank you, Bishop Flunder. This, Dr. Fisher, I'm going to ask you to answer this offline, if you would. It's a question by Daneo Ishango. You're going to find it in Bishop Flunder's, in the comment section. But the last thing, is liberation a subjective concept depending on who's speaking?
I think there's a certain rubric that is wide-ranging enough to be inclusive. But again, as I said earlier, let's not think that liberation is some immediate destination. It's an eternal journey. So it's always contextual. And I think that we have to be willing to keep those contextual factors, which is why I talk about power dynamics a lot. It's not bound by identity. It's not bound by identity, because somebody's identity in one context, if you move them into another geographical, cultural, social, political context, and that may change the power dynamic. So I don't want to say that there's some staple definition of what liberation is, and I don't want to say it's just simply subjective. I think it's a combination of some general principles and practices and ethics, and then some situational or contextual social and political realities.
Thank you, Dr. Fisher. You have
So
been quite,
wonderful.
yes,
Great man. He's a great
wonderful, powerful, transformative. We're grateful for your presence 2 weeks in a row. Really, really good. Listen, I want to tell you.
Not nearly as grateful as I am. Look, before this is my final work. Thank y'all for having me 2 weeks in a row. I am grateful. I appreciate it. Bishop Flunder, thank you. Bishop-elect Vanessa, thank you. Bishop Carlton, Pearson, thank y'all. If I had 10,000 tongues, I probably couldn't thank y'all enough.
We appreciate it, brother. Thank you. It's been our joy.
Again, thank you. And we're going to go to commercial before we give away the book. So we want you all to stay with us, and we'll make sure that that happens. Bishop.
God bless you this evening, everyone. What an incredible conversation with an incredible man of God and good. What a joy. And I want to encourage you tonight, support our broadcasts. Support us, support all of us. Support your own opportunity to hear and be involved in these kinds of conversations. Support us by sending a donation. Send it via Cash App to $ Cash App. And you can send it also to $ TFAM Annual by Cash App, TFAM ANNUAL, or you can send it by PayPal at www.paypal.me/TFAM Justice. If you've been blessed, if you've been empowered, if you've gotten information, if you even got to go home and read something else to improve your own ability to respond to the questions that you must have in your spirit at a time like this, then help us to continue this conversation. We're all in this together, beloved. Help us to continue this conversation and to speak and teach revolution and liberation everywhere. God bless.
Hello everyone, this is Jess Dominic, owner of Bulletin Flight Radio, your story, our station, a proud supporter of progressive Christians from around the world. So please join us every Saturday and Sunday from 2 p.m. until 2 a.m. Eastern Standard Time for the best in gospel house, gospel indie, and inspirational word. And if you're looking to submit your music or sermons, please send us an MP3 and artist pick to bulletinflightpros@gmail.com. All submissions are free. Thank you for tuning in, and God bless.
And And for your pleasure, Antonio Mattier is a lifestyle realtor. And if you want to donate to your church and give to your church while accomplishing your goal of home ownership, please, please, please look up Lifestyle Global Properties. Lifestyle Global Properties will donate 10% of the commission earned from your real estate transaction to your choice of either City of Refuge, which stands for COR, or COR, which stands for City of Refuge, or TFAM, the Fellowship of Affirming Ministries, in your name when you utilize our brokerage to purchase or sell a property, residential or commercial, in California or Georgia. Again, look up Lifestyle Global Properties. We thank God for Bishop-elect Sonia E. Williams and RIM. On Tuesday nights, they present TNT, which stands for Tuesday Night Talks, RIM Fellowship UCC. You can go to their website at www.rimatlanta.org. And on every Tuesday at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for everyday, real, relevant, Bible-led conversations. You can find them on Zoom or on Facebook Live. You can find them on Instagram and on YouTube as well. Thank you so much, Bishop-elect Sonia E. Williams. Now we have the Healing Place Apothecary. The owner and founder is Nubian Flunder. She is the daughter of our presiding bishop. And you can go to her website at www.thp, which stands for the Healing Place Apothecary.com. That's thpapothecary.com to select items, to purchase items for your skin, for your health and wellness. Please visit the website. We also have Black History Month is coming, and we have Sky Michelle Teas and Things. You can go to www.skymichelle.com. Sky Michelle is the kid boss. She has a collection of t-shirts already, Dope Black t-shirts, Dope Black Elder, Dope Black Son, Dope Black Pastor. She has a faith collection. She has YA Flunder quotes as well as Kara motivational quotes. You can also customize a t-shirt to your liking, which is available. You can follow her on her Facebook page and her Instagram page, which is at I am Sky Michelle. Kara Solutions, focus on your passion. Let Kara handle the rest. Susan A. Webley is the founder and operator of this particular business. If you need remote production and video conferencing, admin, tech support, let Kara do the heavy lifting so that you can focus on your event. Custom branding, promo graphics, overlays, intro, outro videos, presentation, show development, planning, guest engagement, training on Zoom, StreamYard, Restream, everything. And so you can go to www.kara-solutions.com or you can just email her at sue@kara-solutions.com for a free consultation. If you want to advertise with Beyond the Gatekeepers, please feel free to contact us at beyondthegatekeepersshow@gmail.com. That's beyondthegatekeepersshow@gmail.com. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. So glad to have you here. Prayerfully, we will be back on next week, and we have guests. And before we do that, we have our giveaway is coming. You put your hashtag in, Beyond the Gatekeepers. Let's see who won a book tonight. All right, Miko Mo is the winner on tonight of the book. Miko, I'm going to ask that you go to Beyond the Gatekeepers page and that you inbox your full name and your address so that we can get a book to you. Please know that his books are on back order and you will get the book. Again, everyone, thank you for joining us tonight. Thank you, Dr. Earle Fisher. Of course, thank you, Bishop Flunder. Our prayers to Bishop Carlton Pearson tonight and those who are in bereavement. We want you to know that we are so grateful for your presence on Beyond the Gatekeepers, and we look forward to seeing you on next week. Have a blessed week. God bless. Thank you for joining us again. Very much.
day.